Backstories Podcast.
All right, get ready for a deep dive that's both heartbreaking and brilliant. We're talking Amy Winehouse.
Definitely a powerful combination.
We're going deep into her Wikipedia page today, way beyond the tabloid drama to try and really understand Amy Winehouse, the artist.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in those sensationalized stories.
Dope.
But her music, it's rooted in something much deeper. It's fascinating to me how she bridges this gap between, deep jazz and pop culture stardom.
Right. Like, everyone and their grandma knows Rehab. But did you know she was part of the National Youth Jazz Orchestra? That's not your average pop star backstory.
No, not at all. It speaks volumes about her musical foundation. She was born in '83 to a Jewish family in London, and honestly, music was kind of in her DNA.
Oh, yeah.
Her dad, a huge Sinatra fan, her uncles, jazz musicians, and get this, even her grandmother dated Ronnie Scott.
Wait, Ronnie Scott? Like the jazz club Ronnie Scott?
The one and only. A legend in British jazz.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking serious musical pedigree here. I mean, it makes sense then, her going to those performing arts schools. Susie Earnshaw Theater School, Sylvia Young Theater School, and then, of course, the Brit School.
Yeah, you could almost say it was inevitable with that kind of background.
Right.
But it's more than just training, Especially the Brit School. They really focus on fostering individuality.
Interesting.
Think about it. Adele, Jessie J. A lot of unique voices come out of there.
Huh.
It wasn't just about hitting the right notes,
Right.
It was about finding your own sound, your own style. And Amy, she was already doing that from a young age. Got her own guitar at 14, started writing songs. She even worked as an entertainment journalist for a bit.
No way. Really?
Yeah, imagine that. Teenage Amy interviewing some up-and-coming band, then going home to write a song 10 times better.
I love that. I can totally see her doing that.
Yeah.
So all this leads us to Frank, her debut album in 2003.
Yeah, heavily jazz-influenced, critically acclaimed. She even won an Ivor Novello Award for songwriting.
Okay, hold on. I know the Ivor Novellos are a big deal, but how big are we talking? Because Frank also went platinum. Right. And it was nominated for the Mercury Prize, which, if I'm being honest, I need a little refresher on.
So the Mercury Prize, think of it like the UK's version of the Grammys, but specifically for albums that really push the boundaries.
Okay.
Genre doesn't matter. It's all about artistic merit. Less about sales, more about the music itself.
Interesting.
So for Frank to be shortlisted, it meant critics were taking her seriously, not just as a pop star, but as a true musician.
Wow. And she was, 20 years old at that point? Amazing. But there's something that really struck me about Frank. She later said she was only 80% behind the album.
Oh, yeah.
Because the record label kind of pushed some decisions on her. It makes you about that whole balance between an artist's creative control versus the pressures of the music industry.
It's the age-old dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Do you compromise to reach a wider audience or stay true to your vision, even if it means a smaller stage?
Right.
Amy was clearly wrestling with that, and it definitely shaped her next album.
Which brings us to Back to Black. Her breakout album, released in 2006. Huge shift in sound. So what changed between Frank and this one?
Well, she moved away from that pure jazz sound and leaned into the 1950s-60s girl group vibe, started working with producers like Mark Ronson and Salaam Remi.
Oh, okay.
It was still soulful, but with this retro edge that just resonated with a global audience.
And Rehab, that song became an anthem. Top charts worldwide, won awards. It really solidified her as a global icon. But I'm curious, is there anything about her creative process, in the studio, that stands out to you?
Her perfectionism. She was known for spending hours, and I mean hours, in the studio fine-tuning every little detail.
Wow.
And get this, she used to test out new songs on her dad in his taxi.
No way.
Yeah, imagine that. You're just hopping in a cab and suddenly you're hearing what would become a worldwide hit.
That's incredible. You can practically hear him saying, Amy, this one's a banger. But her success with Back to Black, it did something else too.
What's that?
It kind of reintroduced that classic soul and R&B sound to a whole generation who, might not have discovered it otherwise.
Absolutely. And that impact can't be overstated. And it wasn't just the music, but her style too. The beehive, the winged eyeliner, those bold outfits.
She became a trendsetter.
Yeah, a fashion icon even. But sadly, alongside all that success, her personal struggles really started to overshadow things.
Yeah, that's when things took a turn.
Amy's struggles with addiction and mental illness, it all became very public.
Fueled by the media, of course.
Exactly. The tabloids were relentless. It was a difficult period for her, marked by canceled tours, erratic performances, very public personal problems.
Yeah, the tabloids definitely didn't help. It's hard to imagine dealing with that kind of pressure while also battling those inner demons.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all that, she achieved something incredible.
The 5 Grammys in 2008.
5 Grammys.
For Back to Black, no less. Tying the record for most wins by a female artist in one night. It's a stark reminder of her incredible talent, even in the face of such turmoil.
It really makes you wonder, how much did that fame and media frenzy contribute to her struggles? Could things have been different? It's hard to say.
It's a question that deserves consideration, but it's also important to remember, Amy was more than just a musician battling addiction.
Right, there were other sides to her.
She had other passions, other dimensions that often get overshadowed.
Absolutely, like her work with charities, especially those focused on children. And then there's Lioness Records.
Yes, her own label.
Which she launched to support her goddaughter, Diane Vromfield.
There was a real generosity and nurturing side to Amy that often got lost in the headlines.
And it's a shame because it shows such depth to her character.
It does.
It goes way beyond that troubled star narrative. She clearly cared about giving back, about supporting others. It makes her story even more heartbreaking in a way.
It really does add another layer to understanding her legacy, which, sadly, we have to address. Because in 2011, Amy Winehouse
died at the age of 27 from alcohol poisoning. A huge loss for the music world. Sparked a lot of conversations about addiction, mental health, the pressures of fame.
It was a tragic ending to a life and career that held so much promise. But even in death, Amy's impact continued to grow.
You're right. After her death, Back to Black became the UK's best-selling album of the 21st century at that time. Her music clearly resonated with people, and that connection, it didn't fade away.
It's a testament to the power of her artistry, and it reminds us that sometimes we only truly appreciate brilliance after it's gone. But thankfully, her music lives on, and the Amy Winehouse Foundation, they're continuing her work, supporting young people struggling with addiction.
That's a fitting tribute to her legacy. But before we wrap up part 1 of our deep dive, I'm curious, what stood out to you so far?
Honestly, it's just how multifaceted she was. The jazz prodigy, the pop culture icon, the fashion trendsetter, the advocate. It's a lot to unpack.
Right. And sometimes it feels like those more sensationalized aspects of her life, they overshadow all those other dimensions.
Definitely.
It's important to remember she was a complex human being, and her story is both inspiring and incredibly heartbreaking.
Exactly. And her music, it wasn't just about catchy tunes. She poured her heart and soul into those lyrics, exploring themes of love, loss, addiction, those raw emotions we all experience.
It's what makes her music so relatable, so timeless. Even if you haven't lived through the exact same experiences, you can still connect with those raw, honest emotions.
Absolutely. So, listener, as we head into part 2 of our deep dive, I want you to think about this. Which Amy Winehouse song speaks to you the most, and why? Hold on to that thought, because we'll be delving deeper into her music and legacy.
Okay, we're back. Part 2 of our Amy Winehouse deep dive. We've covered her jazz background, those amazing albums, the highs, the lows, and of course her tragic passing.
And we left you with a question. Which of her songs speaks to you the most?
Right. It's amazing how music can connect us so deeply, even to artists whose lives seem so different from our own.
It is.
Like, I might not have lived through the same things Amy did, but there's something about that raw honesty in her lyrics,
Yeah.
It just hits home. But before we get too deep into the emotional side of her music, there's one more fact about her career that just blew my mind.
Are you talking about the Tony Bennett duet?
Wait, how did were you reading my mind?
Let's just say I'm pretty familiar with Amy's work. And yeah, that collaboration, it's pretty remarkable. One of her last recordings was a duet with the legendary Tony Bennett for his album Duets the Second.
Wow. Okay.
They sang Body and Soul.
Okay, that's a pairing I never would have predicted. It's like old school crooner meets like edgy Soulstress. Talk about a clash of styles.
Right, but somehow it works. Their voices blend beautifully, and the song takes on this whole new dimension. And knowing that it was released posthumously, it adds this layer of, poignancy you can't ignore.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, like a tribute to her talent. And it makes you wonder, what if? What if Amy were still with us today? What kind of music would she be making? What boundaries would she be pushing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We can only speculate, of course. knowing Amy, her constant evolution, her willingness to experiment, her deep connection to those roots of soul and jazz, it's safe to say she would continue to surprise us.
Oh, absolutely. She was a rule breaker, an innovator,
Yeah.
true original. And her influence is still so strong.
Definitely.
You can hear it in the music of so many artists today.
She paved the way for a whole new wave of female artists who aren't afraid to be bold, to be vulnerable, to express themselves authentically.
And in a world that's always trying to put people in boxes, that's a pretty powerful legacy to leave behind. But let's circle back to that question we asked earlier. Which Amy Winehouse song speaks to you the most, and why? I bet some of our listeners are having aha moments right now, connecting those dots between her lyrics and their own lives.
There's a reason her music still resonates, even all these years later. It's that raw honesty, that vulnerability, her ability to capture those universal experiences. Love, loss, longing, those things we all go through.
Totally. It's like she's singing directly to your soul, laying bare those emotions we often try to hide.
Exactly. And that's where the true power lies. It's not just about the technical skill of her voice or the catchy melodies, but the emotional depth she brought to every song.
And that brings us to the heart of this deep dive. It's not just about, listing off facts from her Wikipedia page. It's about understanding why Amy Winehouse matters, what her legacy really represents.
It's about recognizing the complexity of her story, the talent that shone through despite her struggles, and the lasting impact she had on music, on culture.
Right. She was more than just a tabloid headline. She was a gifted artist, a complex human being, and her music continues to touch people's lives in such profound ways.
It's a legacy worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. We've still got more to uncover in the final part of this deep dive. We'll be exploring specific songs, diving into those lyrical themes, maybe even shedding a few tears along the way.
So grab your tissues, listeners, and get ready for a deep dive into the emotional world of Amy Winehouse.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our Amy Winehouse deep dive. We're going even deeper now, beyond those headlines, beyond even the big hits, to really get to the core of what made her music so powerful.
Yeah, we've touched on her influences, the jazz background, that 60s girl group sound.
Right.
But what really connected with people was how she channeled all that into something so raw, so honest.
Totally. Like she took those classic sounds and mixed them with, her own life, her pain, her love, all those struggles.
Exactly. And she wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, to let people see those messy, complicated emotions that honestly we all feel.
Yeah, but don't always want to talk about.
Exactly.
Like in Back to Black. That title track, so heartbreaking. But anyone who's ever, loved and lost, they get it.
It's universal, and the way she uses the music to heighten that emotion.
Oh, yeah.
Those minor chords, the strings, the backing vocals, it all builds this incredible atmosphere of longing and despair.
It's heavy. But then you've got a song like Tears Dry on Their Own, which, like on the surface, it's upbeat, almost like a Motown kind of vibe.
Right, almost deceptive.
But then you listen to the lyrics and it's a whole different story.
It's that contrast that makes it so brilliant, I think. The juxtaposition of that classic upbeat sound with lyrics about heartbreak, about moving on. It's like she's putting on a brave face.
Right.
But underneath, you can feel that sadness.
And you can hear it in her voice, too. That blend of strength and vulnerability. It's what makes her so captivating.
Her voice really was an instrument. She could convey so much emotion with just a few notes.
Totally. And then, of course, there's Rehab, the song that became like an anthem, but also kind of controversial.
It's interesting how that song took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
It became a symbol of her struggles, but also the statement of defiance, in a way.
Yeah, she was owning her truth, even if it wasn't pretty. I think that's what resonated with so many people.
Absolutely. It was a reminder that we don't have to fit into these neat little boxes society tries to put us in.
Right.
It's okay to be messy, to be flawed, to be human.
And that's what makes Amy Winehouse's music so timeless.
Yeah.
Right? It's a reflection of the human experience.
Yeah.
All its complexities, its contradictions, everything.
It's a reminder that even in darkness, there can be beauty. And that sometimes the most powerful art comes from those vulnerable places.
I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Amy Winehouse. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
It's been a privilege to explore her life, her music, and hopefully you've come away with a deeper appreciation for the artist behind the Beehive.
We've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to discover.
Oh, yeah.
So keep listening, keep exploring, and keep Amy's music alive.
Until next time, keep diving deep. And never stop searching for those moments of brilliance wherever you find them.
Backstories Podcast.